And so I think we can start. So it's really a great pleasure and an honor to have Marina Hirota speak to us today. Marina is, I think, a mathematician by training, but then also did some engineering and I think has a master's degree officially in engineering and a PhD in metrology. So it's an extremely interdisciplinary scientist, now a professor at the Federal University of Santa Catarina. And so I think Marina is most famous for using concepts, I would say, from like the broad range of applied mathematics and using them or sort of transferring them to theoretical ecology with a focus on tropical rainforests and in particular the Amazon rainforest. And if I had to sort of really, if I wanted to really know what's the fate of the Amazon, what's its current state, how is the Amazon doing, then Marina would be the first and the second person to ask. So with that, I'm really, really happy that you're here, Marina, and I'm very much looking forward to your talk. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Nicholas, and thanks for the seminar series to have me. It's a pleasure to be here. Um, all the times that every time I go to like a mathematical, at least in the title audience, I feel going back home. So somehow it feels psychologically, at least, it feels good, you know. So it's a different language, and I've been working with ecologists and stuff. So it's really good to be here, and it feels like going back home. So thanks for having me and for the invitation. So as Nicholas said, I have been working with the Amazon ecosystems, not only in the tropics, but mostly. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is what's going on in the Amazon, so disturbances, impacts, and the resilience of Amazonian ecosystems, not only forests, but also savannas. We don't talk about them very much because they're just a few patches around. But eventually, um, I think at some point they will make a difference. We are not going to focus on savannas today, mostly forests, but just a heads up on savannas as well. So I'm going to guide you through the motivation to study the Amazonia. And I think most of you or some of you already know reasons to study the Amazon, but I'm going to show mine today. And then the theoretical framework Nicholas referred to, and what I used mostly to guide the data analysis we perform, and I think modeling as well. And then the questions would be, what are the tipping points identified, at least for the Amazon? And then this is also part of the discussion, if they are tipping points in plural or if it's only one tipping point. And I think together with Nicholas, we've discussed about this. But I'm going to show just what we have, and then we can discuss later. And how are things already changing in the Amazon in terms of abiotic conditions, so climate, mostly rainfall, I'm going to show today. And what is the impact on vegetation, mostly on forests? Most of the talk will be about forests. And what is affecting resilience? What are the evidences we have in terms of impacts in resilience? And then how we move forward and how the communities around the world could get together to discuss and move forward towards or not towards, but facing the challenges ahead. And I would say not for the Amazon only, but also for other ecosystems all over the place. I think we need to get together more and more and contribute and collaborate among disciplines and and I think ways of life as well, because culturally we can be very different too. So the motivation for the Amazon, I would start with the Amazon being one of the terrestrial tipping elements of the Earth system. So in here we have, can you see my pointer? my arrow here. Yeah, I cannot see you. Okay. So then we have boreal forests here, and permafrost, very important. And in here as well, in Siberia, and also the Amazon rainforest. So being a tipping element of the Earth system means that if you this ecosystem, that this system happens to change in the future, this could also trigger other elements of the Earth system towards change. So this is very important because somehow it connects different elements of the Earth system all over the globe. And also because Amazonia has been considered a key like climate system element, because what happens in the Amazon can change what happens in the entire globe in terms of global temperature, and also the global temperature affecting the Amazon. So it's a loop, and it's a closed loop that it's very much driven by deforestation, fires, and land use in the Amazon. And in return, in terms of climate change, the dry season length, duration, length, and also intensity, and rainfall and temperature extremes over the basin. So this is important to understand how like climate change is driving changes in the Amazon, and also the other way around, how changes in the Amazon can or may drive in the future what is going on in the planet. And then the theoretical framework we use, and in here is very simplified and very simple, is related to the conditions we have and the state of the system. In this case, it could be forest, it could be savanna, it could be corals, it could be anything, or like a subsystem of the Earth system that we consider here, or it could be the Earth system itself. So the conditions here could be rainfall, temperature, soil nutrients, and so on. And what we try to see is how the ecosystem will respond to the conditions. This is mostly used because we don't have a long enough time series, so we use what we call space for time substitution. Lots of critiques on this, but at least one step forward towards understanding changes in the future. So we can have linear responses, non-linear responses, but still a bit like with different slopes here. And also we can have something like this, where we see and observe bifurcation points here, F1 and F2. There are also extended to tipping points, or they're called tipping points here, the bifurcation points in the system. Most importantly, and different from the only nonlinear or changes or responses, is that between F1 and F2 in conditions, there are two potential states for this ecosystem, a general one. So they share a range of conditions in which they can exist. So it could, in our case, it could be either forest or low cover state that people call savannas as well. And then in terms of the changes, if we have a system responding to conditions like this, a potential change in conditions, so let's say climate change, could trigger a very like abrupt change, but abrupt could be like thousands of years, but faster change if we reach point F1. So it could be directly downwards and not towards a path, right? And the way back would be through F1. So we have like a different paths for different changes. And then a change in conditions for forests, for instance, climate change, inducing dry season length differences could trigger a change in forest downwards here. or it could be a change in state. So deforestation related to human activities could also potentially make this point cross the instability region here, and then it could also um, drive the system towards a very undesirable, undesired state. So this is more or less what we use as a background, but of course, lots of different things, but this is the essence of what we use here. And the results following will be based on this theoretical framework. So the first question, what are the tipping points, or only one tipping point in the Amazonian system? So I'm going to show here just them separately, but of course they can all be related together and comprise only one tipping point, but we don't know this one yet. So I'm going to show you what we have in the literature related to what could trigger a tipping point uh, in the Amazon. First, in the large scale, and this is mostly results from large scale modeling, we have global warming. And then 2 to 4 degrees Celsius up, and we are in 1.1 more or less, going to 1.2, could trigger substantial changes in the Amazon because of a regional climate feedback. So when we have a behavior like this is mostly due to feedback. So I forgot to say this. So crossing this is very abstract, right? If you cross, you go downwards. But this happens because you have like a closed loop of interactions leading the system towards like this state here down. And then mostly we need feedbacks to drive the system under these dynamics here. And then the regional climate feedback would be related to global climate change, inducing changes in regional climate within the Amazon basin, and this could trigger a more severe rainfall reduction. It depends on the model. A less severe rainfall reduction, and then under more severe rainfall reduction, forest dieback, which in turn fits back into the global climate change, right? Because if you have forest dieback, you have differences all over the atmospheric circulation over the globe, and this fits back into global climate change in terms of global temperature. And this also enhances this regional climate response through reduced evapotranspiration. In the case you have less severe rainfall reduction, this could go under a chain of interactions that is slightly different. So no dieback, depending on CO2 fertilization, and again, feeding back into global climate change, anthropogenic CO2 emissions mostly related. But in any case, faster or slower, this chain of interactions can increase a global climate change or increase global temperatures while reducing vegetation cover in the Amazon. In terms of rainfall related tipping points, what we know from remote sensing data, not necessarily model simulations, and then using what I call space for time substitution, we have a distribution of potential changes shown in this map. So in like light green here, we have what is forest and can be a savanna in the future because of climate or rainfall conditions. Oops. And in dark green, we have deterministic forests that could change only other changes other than rainfall changes are present. So what we have here for this bistability region, currently forest or non-forest, is that it's confined between 1,000 and 2,000 millimeters a year, and a dry season length of more than 7 months. So if you have these conditions, like this rainfall regime, in the future, changes could trigger vegetation cover, a decrease or increase in these regions. And this is mostly due to the fire feedback. So if you decrease rainfall, you also have the potential for fire triggering enhanced, and this could lead to less vegetation, and less vegetation, less humidity, more fires, and so on. If you cross like 1,000 millimeters rainfall, if the decrease goes beyond and below 1,000 millimeters rainfall, then the climate or the rainfall envelope to have forests does not exist anymore, and you can potentially have a low cover state or a non-forest state. And remember I said that we could have changes in conditions, so global temperature and also rainfall more regionally. And also we can have changes in the state, so related to human activities and deforestation. So this is called deforestation tipping point, together with the evapotranspiration feedback. And this uses modeling trends in deforestation and trends in rainfall to be depicted. So it's like a combination of factors leading to like a systemic dieback in the Amazon. So it's the entire Amazon. It's not like one spot or the other, but a systemic dieback. And this threshold has been presented as 20-25% deforestation, leading to a very substantial reduced precipitation because of the reduced evapotranspiration. So if you have deforestation, you have less evapotranspiration, less condensation, less clouds, less rainfall, and this reinforces the initial disturbance, which is deforestation in this case. So this could also spread spatially, and only we will only have like northwestern Amazon remaining mostly. So it's more like a systemic, specially derived dieback or collapse in the forest. This is very criticized. Many ecologists don't really believe this can happen, but modelers, on the other hand, say this is potentially a scenario that we can see in the future. And then another magic and very unconsensual word, I would say, leading to savannization. And this is quite a problem for ecologists because they think savannas are very biodiverse and very rich and very important for the world. And if a forest turns into a savanna and this is bad, this kinds of, puts savannas in a very horrible position, I would say. So I don't really use savannization anymore. I have in my past life, but now I'm just using low tree cover, degraded, non-forest state, because it can go, as we're going to see, to different directions, following different trajectories, and this will not end up in a savanna necessarily. And then, now that we have like the critical thresholds, let's say, and Nicholas gave this suggestion like few weeks ago, I would say. So if we have the critical thresholds, how are things already changing? So this is, I think, the second question, at least to me, right? We already know what we cannot or can cross or reach, but how are things changing? How do we see the change already? First, climate has been shown to be changing differently throughout the Amazon. So we have here three like regions, large regions, but still three for current conditions. So 40 years from like a period of 40 years. So we have central, eastern, northern Amazon here. And then changes in in temperature, and blue is for more certain, red for less certain. So temperature increasing, rainfall more or less the same, no trend in the data. And then here we have like extreme rainfall increasing, extreme droughts increasing, and flooding increasing. On the other hand, in northwestern Amazon, we do have temperature, so it's consistent, but rainfall is increasing as well. Less certain, rainfall is kind of a problem in assessing like uncertainties, as you can see, but still going up, and flooding as well. So more water here, more temperature, more water. So the interaction among this also affects humidity in the atmosphere. And then in southeastern Amazon, we have temperature, so it's pretty much consistent, but rainfall decreases and droughts increasing. So kind of balances what's going on in northwestern Amazon and southern Amazon, but it's different. And of course, the intensity of the changes is also different, right? But it's changing already. Also, the dry season length, which is also very important for plants, is increasing. So in the y-axis, we have time, and the x-axis, we have like months, so January to December. And then we see like within the red lines here, we see the dry season, when precipitation is below 100 millimeters mostly. And then we see here that this in black here, in black line, we have like the boundaries of the dry season. And we see a trend in yellow here that the dry season is delayed. So this means that when plants are already stressed because of the lack of water, they experience a little bit more of drought, right? So it's extended. And this for plants is different than having like an extended dry season starting earlier, right? It has consequences as well and implications, but it's different for plants, the way they respond, right? So the dry season is becoming longer, and it has been delayed about 15 days and counting. So if we think about deforestation, increasing fires, and also this delay and the interactions, the synergistic effect of this can be very relevant for certain parts of the basin. This is mostly for southern Amazon, this graph here. So not only the length of the dry season, but also the intensity. So how much water is left for plants during the dry season, and impacts on vegetation functioning. So in here is not only climate, but also what's going on with plants and how they are responding. So this plots here, so every point here in the map is a point where they have dynamics of vegetation or forests, more or less 30 to 40 years during this period. So they measure how plants or how trees are growing and how they're dying or how much they are dying. And what they saw was that the dry season is intensifying, and the measure here is this MCWD. So the amount of the deficit in water we have during the dry season, the cumulative water deficit. And they show here in red the intensity of the decrease. So how much MCWD is decreasing. So the redder, the worse. And then they also show that the recruitment of dry affiliated species, meaning that they cope better with drought periods, is increasing, and the mortality of wet affiliated species is increasing as well. So the plants that don't deal with drought very well, they die. And the ones that deal well with drought or drier periods, they strive. And then we have, as a result, shifts in structure, so composition of the, it's still forest, but a different forest, and the functionality, how the, the forest function is different. So in terms especially of evapotranspiration and how plants deal with water. But we don't have measurements in southeastern Amazon, and this is quite interesting because southeastern Amazon has been like in the media a lot, I think in the past 2 years, more or less. And I'm going to show this here to you. So first, what could drive tree mortality? And this is basically coming from like field ecology. And they are like this, for me, very courageous and brave people who go to the Amazon and very remote places of the Amazon and do extensive field work. And basically what they study, and this is a particular study collecting or and sampling different parts of the Amazon, ranging from like high rainfall volumes, low rainfall volumes, and also seasonality. In here, also not shown, but also here is like soil fertility. It's within this sampling design as well. And what they show here is this. This is a very basic graph, right? But it contains lots of information, at least for me. So, and I had to study a lot to really get what it says. It says so. In here, it's a measure of exposure to hydraulic failure. And hydraulic failure could be one potential mechanism leading to tree mortality. So hydraulic failure means basically that trees will be thirsty and will die of thirst. So they need water within their vessels and xylem to really have the water flow and evapotranspiration and work properly. And what this means is that the higher the value of the hydraulic safety margins, and this is all measured in the field, is a difference among like water potentials within the plant. But I think the most important thing to get here is that if you are like closer to one, and this is all relative, so this is among -1 and 1. So if you are here, it means that you are very far from dying by hydraulic failure, very, very far away. And then in here, if you are here in -1, you're very close to die because you passed the 0. So 0 is like you are okay. Not totally okay, but like still working. Below 0, we have like you crossed the 0 point and you were like operating like without safety, let's say. It is not safe anymore for you. You can die anytime. And then this is a good predictor of relative above ground biomass changes. What this means is also relative, right? So what this means is that these forests here are losing carbon, these ones, and they are precisely the ones operating below their critical thresholds. Whereas these ones, and these are pretty much like conserving carbon, can you see that? It's like more or less within the same range. These ones, they are operating differently in terms of their hydraulic properties, but they are conserving carbon for the whole system, let's say. And then what we have is like less hydraulic safety margin, 50, is related to more turnover. So the plants, they don't care. They just grow fast and they die fast. They grow fast and they die fast. And lots of productivity associated, right? In this sense, this plant or these trees, they live hard and die young. They don't care. At the same time, they are storing less carbon within. their dynamics. And this is very important and has consequences for the global carbon cycling, let's say. And then interestedly, oops, we have Western spoiled. I call them spoiled because they have lots of water and no lack of water in Western Amazon, versus Central Northeastern Amazon forest is striving. They're striving because these are Central Eastern, these are Western, right? Northwestern, so this is all Western, and these are Southern ones, okay? And then what we have is like these ones, Central, Northeastern, and Western forests, they are still storing carbon. The carbon residence time is more or less the same. But the southern ones, they are operating beyond their critical limits. And then in here, we have forests operating, so they function differently in terms of water flow, but they store more or less the same amount of carbon, with Central Northeastern's low growth forests storing more carbon than Western forests. So this is not very intuitive at the first glimpse, but still this is what is going on, okay? And this reflects somehow, is not, there is no scientific connection yet, but it's very interesting for me because southeastern Amazon has been pointed out as a place in the Amazon where we are becoming, not we, but the forests are becoming a carbon source, right? So despite fires, because fire events release lots of carbons to the atmosphere, but not accounting for fires, sorry, only deforestation and rainfall decreases and so on, we can have like this region here already a carbon source. The other one still a carbon sink if you don't include fires, but this one a carbon source. And this again has major implications to what is going on in terms of the global carbon cycle and affecting global temperatures, right? So all in all, we have these changes in the Amazon basin, not only in rainfall patterns and temperature, but also related to vegetation responses. And how is this affecting resilience per se? And where are we heading to? So what can we learn from file-scale ecological studies that can guide us towards a better representation of the models and a better simulation or evaluation of resilience within the Amazon basin? So first, I'm going to show you two studies. There are more, but in here, I think for me, the essence is more or less here. We have what is called a cascading moisture recycling. So we think about the entire basin now, the spatial pattern within the basin. And then we have here a measure of relative resilience. So yellow, losing more resilience, and blue, resisting more, not resisting, but being more resilient. And then what we have here is like the trade winds bringing Atlantic moisture or water vapor from the ocean and crossing the Amazon here and channeling in the Andes and coming to southern Brazil, where I live. And then, for example, I don't know if any of you has been to Foz do Iguaçu, in the waterfalls there, but most of the water coming from the Amazon goes to that place, so southern Brazil, La Plata Basin. And then also, it's very important for South American hydrological cycle because it brings all the disturbances occurring here in Eastern Amazon, including Southeastern Amazon. So the arrows don't go only in northern parts of the Amazon, but all over the place, and bringing, so it's cascading downstream, everything occurring here. So think about the arc of deforestation along this place and how less forests can be evapotranspiring, and then less water to the atmosphere, less water downstream. It's like a river. So people call this like flying rivers. And then the impact of this cascading moisture effect on resilience of southwestern Amazon can be very critical, as you can see here, right? So downstream in southwestern Amazon. We didn't see like high differences as we saw in as high as in southeastern Amazon, but still, you see, different disturbances at play, and they act synergistically, non-linearly, and we still have to figure out what's going on. And then in here again, the evapotranspiration feedback, but then downstream. So deforestation, transpiration decreases, cascading downstream. And then we may lose resilience around here because of this cascading moisture impact. And then a more direct evidence of resilience loss is something like here, something like this one. And we see here it's very heterogeneous, but the redder, the worse. In blue are spots like gaining resilience, and in red, losing resilience. And around 75%, so 3/4 of the basin, are losing resilience at the moment. And this is no space for time, this is time series analysis and a measure of resilience related to how the forests respond faster or slower to like pulses of rainfall decreases, for instance. It could be other disturbances. And for me, what is most striking is why this is going on. And it's going on, and stick to me in the black line here. This is pretty much related to the distance to human land use. So I think for me, the main message here is that human land use has something to do with the decrease in resilience, like pixel by pixel, because regardless of the type of human land use, it somehow affects what's going on with the resilience within the basin. So this is pretty important. So we have here something related to the moisture, so rainfall, and also to human land use direct effect. And then the potential trajectories, where are we heading to? And then from ecology, we have like 3 potential trajectories, and not yet known if they're permanent, persistent, or a transient state. But from native tropical forests, if we consider only wildfires, only and only wildfires, we can end up as a savanna, but it's a very poor savanna in terms of species richness. So like trees and grasses, but most of the trees are the same here, and grasses are invasive species. So it's a very degraded savanna state. And then we have deforestation and wildfires as disturbances, leading to open canopy degraded. And this is very, very degraded, and mostly composed by invasive species or exotic species, and no trees. So the trees here are very far away, not exactly in this site. And then if we add land use changes, this is very interesting, because then you can end up with a forest, but a secondary forest and very monodominant forest. But land use helps having this type of forest, because people let it grow back again before deforesting again and plant again, because of soil nutrient recycling and other properties of the soil that can be very important for what they cultivate in the area. So these are potential trajectories we can have. And my question then is, okay, we have the tipping points. We are not exactly sure if we are crossing them, if it's related to the rainfall, to the carbon. We have evidence of change. But then even if do not cross these non-thresholds, what we see in these pictures for me is that disturbances are highly heterogeneous, right? And so are forest responses, especially what we already can see in composition and structure and functionality. And even if the shifts occur like smoothly, not very abruptly, they have tremendous damages, or they can cause tremendous damages to communities and living within the Amazon basin. It's already causing. So people are already perceiving how changes are occurring and how changes are affecting their lives. And of course, it has major implications for the planet, but also for the livelihoods already in the Amazon. So for me, it's not a matter of crossing a threshold or not, as it is not a matter of crossing 1.5 or 2.0 in global temperature. It's a matter of the changes we are already facing, and it's getting worse, right? So there is no point in only focusing on crossing or not thresholds, but doing something like science-based, policies and feeding people with information if they can or if they want to really drive substantial changes to the planet. And then the next steps for me, not only for the Amazon, but for the ecosystems in general, I can kind of summarize in two questions. And I think this applies for mathematicians, physicists, engineers, earth system scientists, and like ecologists, and so on, anthropologists. How do we deal with the remarkable heterogeneity observed in disturbances and the impacts? Because this is very key for modeling what is going to be in the future. We cannot really see these trajectories I showed you today in models. It's either forest or something else, but it's this something else doesn't really change much in the tropics. So I think it's very, very important and key for us to really think about how we can simulate this for the future, and also um, deal with the uncertainties that we have in the present. So I think people want to be certain of things, right? They want this comfort to be certain of things and to have a schedule and everything. But things are changing, and this is very uncomfortable, right? And uncertainty is very uncomfortable. So how we as scientists deal with uncertainty in a way that we can still communicate to society what is going on in the planet, sorry, and how we can be still in a stabilized earth. So I really like this illustration here because this is time, um, like like long-term time, temporal scale. And then we are more or less here in the middle of the Anthropocene, not middle, but beginning, I would say. And then we can, through biosphere degradation, so more or less the Amazon fits in this box here. Through biosphere degradation, we can cross the planetary thresholds and be in this state. We have been there already. Earth has been there. I have not, but as a human. But we can be here, or we can be in this stabilized Earth for as long as we can, if we have stewardship somehow, and try to stop degrading the ecosystems of the planet. So for me, it's related to heterogeneity mostly and levels of uncertainty, and how we can deal with this to really communicate to society somehow. So from science to society. And I think that's it. That's my last message. I want to thank you again, and thank all the people involved in the group and the things I have been working on, I think, for the past 2 decades, more or less. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Marina, for this very, very interesting talk.
Yeah.
Cool. And thanks for perfectly keeping the time, 45 minutes short.
That's good. I'm glad.
All right, so there is already one question in the chat. I can just read it to you. Interesting talk. I would like to know which dynamical equations are used, especially for vegetation, e.g. Swift-Hohenberg equations.
Wow. Thank you. I'm gonna be honest. I don't know this equation, Swift-Hohenberg equation. I'm sorry, but so this is not the one. But for the results I showed here, it's both mostly data-driven equations. And when we have models for vegetation, it's not only one equation. It's like um, different types of equations driving carbon dynamics mostly. So it's related to biomass. It's not related to tree cover or the coverage of forests, but mostly how um, carbon dynamics um, is within the plant. So how much time carbon is there allocated in leaves, trunk, roots, and how this is changing over time. This is very poor still in representation, but this is what we have. So not with the known mathematical equations, at least that I know. This is simple differential equations or partial or differential equations, like normal ones.
So
But of course, you can try other equations to represent vegetation. I think this is very welcome.
it's actually for so Swift-Hohenberg equations are one of these partial differential equations that are studied a lot when it comes to pattern formation. And
Oh,
quite
right.
interesting
Okay.
because would you agree that the sort of in the models that we use to model vegetation in, as part of Earth system models, or even just to see how the Amazon would respond to different rainfall regimes, we mostly use Coulomb models, where basically it's an ordinary differential equation set for an individual grid cell, but we
Yeah.
don't really, and then we sort of, okay, of course we do that then for many grid cells, but I mean, it's the first time I think about this, but in a sense, it's a bit strange that we in our models that we always use these sort of very local descriptions, and then of course somehow couple them through the code, where there exist all the the equations to model the whole spatial field and so on, but these are not what we use. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it's not used, but it makes sense to use, right, Nicholas? It would.
Yeah.
I think for forests, I haven't really seen a study showing this pattern formation because it's much easier to do this in arid ecosystems. So this is very much seen in arid ecosystems. So we see because in arid ecosystems you have like water in soils driving bushes and like small woody formation. It's basically water. So it's not easy, but I think I would say it's less difficult to represent this type of special dynamics. But in forests, there are so many other sources of water from sky, from the water table, from like the runoff, So it's slightly I think it's slightly not slightly, it's way more difficult to do it for forests. But I would say it would be nice to see something like this for forests. I think it would
Cool,
be tricky, but I think it makes sense. Yeah.
cool. Are there any further questions from the audience? All right, the one I'm not
Yeah.
sure if it's a comment or you can
Still,
read it from Cecile.
yeah. Thank you
I'm
for
gonna,
fascinating exposition. Yeah, thank you, Cecile.
I didn't finish
Internal
what
variability. Sorry?
he said, "Are there any further questions?" So I put that in so that he wouldn't cut off the questions before I finished typing.
Okay. But do you want to? I can read it, or you can also ask it.
Well, the problem, excuse me for interrupting, though, but anyway, I wanted to thank you for a very fascinating exposition and something that's very important. And I was curious as to the role of internal variability. Now, some people use it as an excuse for ignoring changes, but it is not. It's an important source not only of uncertainty, but of noise induced systematic changes.
Yeah.
And I was wondering whether or not you had looked into incorporating stochasticity into your studies, and if this could be done.
Okay. So first, I have not, Cecile, but I think you are absolutely right. Because, well, we know this for the climate system already, right? Internal variability. But if you couple with like terrestrial ecosystem and the responses and the fluxes all over, I think this has an impact as well, but still internal variability, right? I think it is possible to include, although tricky. Haven't tried, but I would say yes. I think it's tricky to separate internal variability at start for starts, right? So just to say, well, this is internal variability and this is not, I think it can be done mostly with modeling. But for data analysis, yeah, I think I have to think a bit more. It is possible, but I'm not sure it's liable enough because of the noise already within the data. I would say it's already loads of noise. How do you separate like noise induced systematic changes, in data, especially remote sensing data? So I would say for observational data, very tricky. For modeling, I think it can be done and should be done. Not sure if I can do this right now, but yeah, I,
Well,
I would say yes. I'm very positive for this.
good. And I would actually suggest that some of the theorems involving fluctuation dissipation theory, where the stochasticity in the system, I mean, by noise, I don't mean something that is undesirable. I mean
Yeah.
just the variability, if you will. And in a lot of ways, one can use fluctuation dissipation theory to see what the effect is. I don't think you can, and I don't think you want to completely make a separation between the deterministic and the noise induced drift, because after all, the noise induced drift is systematic. And so, but you might be able to see what happens in the absence of stochasticity and see how the size of the stochasticity affects your results.
Hmm. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just thinking, okay, what
That's fine.
you just
That's
said.
fine.
Yeah, makes sense to me, Cecile. Yeah, I think I'm going to write this down and I'm going to think about this better. Thank you. Very, very interesting. Can you say it
Thank
again?
What? What? I'm sorry.
The name of the theory, like fluctuation, what?
Dissipation.
Okay.
It's okay. Basically, if you have a balance, and even if there's an imbalance, it affects the tendency of how the variations uh, balance the deterministic forcing. And so it's There's a huge, long history of this, but it is difficult. It's very difficult, but it can be done in a lot of cases.
Okay. Nice. I'm gonna have a look, huh? I think it's good.
And please
Yeah.
contact me if, I mean, it's hard to do things on the top of my head after I've seen this, but I mean, if I could actually uh, give you a more coherent question, then that would be probably good for both of us.
Okay. No, but I think it's good, just the sparks, you know? If we have an idea, then we share and then we expand. So I think it's very nice. I just took a note. I'm gonna have a look. And then perhaps, yeah, send you an email eventually. Thank you, Cecile.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Can I ask a question to sort of both of you in a sense? Because in a way, so in the way how you analyze the data, Marina, or in the way how the, let's say, you showed the one plot from our BoldNet Al paper about
Yeah,
that loss of resilience. And I totally agree with you what you said
yeah.
about sort of where noise plays a role in the data analysis. It's difficult, and in the modeling, then it should be added probably. But in a sense, that way of quantifying resilience, at the very core of that is the fluctuation dissipation theorem, I think, because
Is
we are
it?
we're treating the dynamics as I mean it's we're, let's say, implicitly assuming a kind of Langevin equation description of the system where there's a deterministic drift. We're linearizing that even to have a linear Langevin equation, but it's basically an Ornstein-Uhlenbeck process, and that's sort of the mathematical object that we have in mind, or that really would represent how we are treating the time series that we're measuring. Then what we are after is something like the restoring rate, like how good can the system recover from perturbations? And then to measure the
Mm,
restoring rate, then we use the autocorrelation and whatnot, but we use the noise. And I would say in my head, the noise is basically weather fluctuations and sort of really, day to day, week to week, month to month weather fluctuations that, I mean, small perturbations, small continuous perturbations of the system, of the vegetation system. And we use those to probe the response and then essentially use the fluctuation dissipation theorem to make an inference about how the system would then respond to a large singular perturbation. Does this make sense to you?
yeah. But I think for me to be totally positive, I would really need to understand the fluctuation dissipation theory. I'm not totally into that, so it might be. Uh, I think if I take what Cecile just said, but maybe Cecile can answer better, right? Based on what you just said, I wouldn't say yes, Nicholas, just because I'm not really into the
Cecile,
theory. But yeah,
I would agree with you, Nicholas. I would agree with you almost entirely. I would say that, well, I don't know how you do this, but I mean, if you are assuming a Langevin equation, which need not be linear, I think you're concentrating on linear dynamics because let me spout the heresy that linear dynamics does get a lot of the issues, although it can't treat tipping points. And that's a big, big problem with it. However, the stochasticity can change where those tipping points are. And I think that that's the important thing we need to address. And I would believe that that's the kind of stochastic analysis we need to start approaching.
mm,
yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
May I comment on the another comment that's here? It says how many members you may need for a big system to create an ensemble system to compare with a deterministic system. And that, first of all, I have to object. Oh, it's late. Let me just say that, I mean, just because you have an ensemble doesn't mean that the single system is not stochastic. It's just a terminology that basically is a sore point with me. So thank you for humoring me and letting me say that.
Yeah, thanks for already commenting on the other question or comment that was in the chat. That's great. In principle, we are already 3 minutes over time, but if there is a pressing question, further pressing question from the audience, then I think we all would have the time for that. But then if there is not, I have here a list of questions. Maybe I can ask you one quick question because, Marina, because last week there was this paper in Nature that says that we are approaching really the temperature thresholds. And
Yeah.
I mean, we have been concerned about rainfall thresholds all along. And now it might be that temperature is just sort of taking over, and you know, I mean, maybe temperature changes so fast that even the rainfall patterns don't change as fast, that in the end it will just tip because of the temperature.
Yep. Yeah, this is another thing. I didn't include this because I'm still thinking about this, Nicholas.
Yeah, I'm confused. Yeah.
Yeah, the thing is that we have been studying so much water, how water deficit can drive changes in vegetation, right? And then there's this group in southeastern Amazon measuring like I showed like hydraulic traits, né? Vegetation hydraulic traits. And then they are doing this a similar thing for temperature. So instead of percentage loss of conductivity in plants, they are measuring temperature loss of functionality, temperature driven loss of functionality in vegetation. Because in southeastern Amazon, increase in temperature is a super important factor, not in other places of the basin. But then Chris Doughty comes and collaborators come with a paper showing this consistently all over the place, right? So I'm still thinking, but I think what can happen in terms of temperature is that if you increased temperature, you have differences in vapor pressure deficit, right? Either if you have the same amount of moisture in the atmosphere or not. So it can be combined, but if temperature increases, you have a stronger driver of pulling water outside the plant. If the plant has this very fast dynamics, this can trigger some like a life cycle, a faster life cycle, you know? So for me, it's very much related still with water, but temperature indirectly affects how transpiration in plants will occur. And this is going to make things different, I guess, just because it can be, I think the effect of water deficit can be increased by temperature increases. This is what I mean. So just because temperature per se can impact vapor pressure deficit, and this drives most of transpiration dynamics, I would say. And this I have to more carefully read the paper because there are nuances, but still, yeah, I would say this for starts.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, no, that was already very helpful for me. Yeah, so you would also say that it's mostly going via the effects of increasing temperature in affecting hydrological processes.
Yes, first, but then related to these ecological studies for temperature, the thing is that if the leaf, this is a more direct temperature driven effect, and then the leaf can warm to a point that it dysfunction, you know, it's not functioning anymore. So this is a more direct effect. If the leaf loses functionality, the plant can have problems in doing transpiration and allocating carbon. You see, so it's a more direct, and this is what they are measuring, the thermal efficiency of the plant, because it burns somehow, the temperature above 50 degrees Celsius, which is a lot. But they're kind of registering 50 degrees Celsius already in southeastern Amazon, so it can have impacts on the what they call thermal efficiency of the plant. So this is more direct. If you lose your leaves, you lose your ability to really allocate carbon, right? Not by not doing photosynthesis.
Yeah.
So this can be a problem as well. But I'm not sure this is throughout the basin. I think it's more concentrated in
Okay.
southeastern Amazon for now. For now. Yeah.
All right. Thanks a ton, Marina. Very, very great
Yeah.
talk. Really interesting discussion. So for everybody else, we will continue on October 3rd, and also, of course, for Marina, if you want to join in the audience, we will have on October 3rd at 9 a.m. again, Los Angeles time. We will have Paulo Gorman speak. We will follow up on the mailing list with a title and abstract, and of course, hope to see many of you next month. And for now, yeah, thank you so much, Marina. Have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Talk soon. All the
Thank you,
best.
and thank you all for listening and for the discussion. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
All right. Take care. All the best. Bye bye.
Bye.